right, I see people coming on. Let's see how many planning board members we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5.
I have 5 marked on my tracking sheet.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Oh,
6.
Yep, now it's 6.
Yep. We are just missing Elise
Through the
and Rob.
chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Well, good evening, everyone. This is Gary Trendle, Chair of the Hopkinton Planning Board, and I hereby call our March 4th, 2024 meeting to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body as well as members of the public may access the meeting via virtual means. Participants may access the meeting through the remote meeting link as posted on the meeting's agenda and through the town's online calendar. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participating in the meeting may do so by raising their hand or otherwise signaling their intent to speak. This meeting will be recorded. Please take care to mute your microphone unless you have been recognized by the chair. We will now confirm attendance of members. Please respond with present if you are on the call. Is Rob here yet? No, no Rob. Jane?
Present.
Elise? I don't see Elise yet either. Matthew?
Present.
Michael?
Present.
Vic?
Present.
Parker?
Present.
And Gary is, of course, here. All right, well, let me quickly go through the agenda. We have had a couple of, I guess, really just one minor change and some additional material that came through that John was kind enough to send over to us. But we will go ahead and start with the administrative items, and specifically, we'll save the minutes for the end, but we'll go ahead and get through the other pieces. Then we're actually going to go a little bit out of order here. We'll go to the MBTA communities public hearing first. Just given that we have a guest, we want to be respectful to her time. We will then go to the stormwater regulations, and the Elmwood Farms project has requested a continuance. So that will be how we work through our agenda this evening. So just put my notes here. First things first, just want to, I'm sure that the planning board members all saw that unfortunately Ron Prefer has chosen to resign from the planning board. And as most of you know, typically when someone resigns, we will appoint someone via joint hearing with the select board for the remainder or until the next election, at which point we will hold an election for the remaining time on that term. However, in this situation, given the timing and given that the election is a little over 2 months away, a recommendation from John and Town Hall is that we actually don't fill that position for this short period of time, but that we still that we still add that position to the ballot in May. So, John, did I get all that right? And so the decision before us is as a board is do we still want to go forward with a joint appointment with the select board, or are we comfortable waiting until the next town election?
Yeah, through the chair, that's basically it. And I just will also point out, The select board, I believe tomorrow night is going to officially ask the town clerk to add that planning board position to the ballot. Because it's in a weird time where it doesn't automatically get added. So they have to officially ask for it to be added. So I don't know if that factors in anybody's decision.
So my recommendation is to follow John's guidance and not appoint. I will say that's one of the benefits of having a nine-member board, is that we can absorb one less person a little bit more easily without having a substantial impact. And to me, it doesn't make sense to go through the process for what would likely be an appointment of about a month. But I'll open it up to the board and see if folks have thoughts otherwise, or if that seems reasonable to them.
Through the chair, it makes total sense to me.
I agree.
Yeah, I would second that as well, or third that.
Okay.
Also concur. What's Gary? What's the quorum? Is it still we need 4 people at that point, or is it still 5?
We still need a majority, so it's 5.
Okay.
John, do we need to vote on this then, or I'm seeing
No,
alignment?
you just
so
take no
I think-
action.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take no action, and I'm assuming that the select board will have that position added to the ballot. Okay. Next on the agenda is a vote to add Connolly Farm open space acceptance article to the open space donations designation. John, do you want to quickly explain what's before us here?
Sure. So we're trying to get into the habit of having the planning board, when they recommend acceptance of open space, also identify the entity that will be the recipient of the open space. So this is kind of in response to the Open Space Preservation Commission's frustration that they were not fully requested to be the entity for previous open space. So now we're gonna just make sure that they get a say, and then planning board can make that known, so that when it goes to town meeting, all that is already resolved.
And so in this particular case, the OSPC has already met and has formalized their request that they would like to be the recipient of the open space associated with Emerald Drive. So the motion before us, well, before I go through that, any questions or discussion from the planning board? Yes, Jane.
So there was a lot of discussion actually at the Open Space Commission about these, particularly the Conley Farms property. And I'm wondering if the language that we will be accepting is the same language that we, as a planning board, voted to accept way back when, or are we accepting new language as proposed by the Open Space? Because I know that they wanted some things changed, and it was a suggestion because they recognized the fact that the planning board couldn't change it without reopening the whole process. So I'm just wondering where that is, John.
Through the chair, we're not changing anything based on open spaces discussions at this point. That would all have to go through the planning board process if they want to change boundaries or anything else. So right now it's still, you're not voting on accepting the open space or recommending the acceptance of the open space. We did that at the last meeting. This is just kind of an add-on to that vote to say, in addition to recommending accepting the open space, we also want Open Space Preservation Commission to be the owner of the open space.
Correct.
So nothing is
that.
changing from the previous articles.
Okay.
Just adding the
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on that, I will entertain a motion. The planning board designate the Open Space Preservation Committee as the recipient of the open space donations on the 2024 annual town meeting warrant for the Whisper Way and Emerald Drive OSLPD subdivisions.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. Okay. Moving on to an A&R for 0 Elm Street and 30 West Main Street. And it looks like we have the applicant before us. I'm wondering, John, if maybe in the interest of time, if you want to quickly explain this, and then the applicant is here for any questions that may come up.
Mm. Okay.
John, is that okay
Yeah,
with you?
yeah. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the plan
Okay.
right now.
All right.
All right. There we go. So this proposal is to change the lot lines on these lots. So there's 3 lots. There's this lot here. There's, sorry, 2 lots. There's 2 lots. There's this lot here, and then there's this lot here. And so these hashed are the old lot lines right here and down here. So they would create a new lot line here. So they would section off this portion of this lot, create this as a standalone lot, and then add this lot to there. Sorry, it was 3 lots. Remove this lot line, combine these all into one lot, and this into one lot. So you're taking 3 lots, making it 2. And the plan is, this is an existing house. The plan is to put another house somewhere on this lot. And they've already gotten a variance from the ZBA to not access the lot from their frontage. So their frontage is gained up here on Elm Street, but this is all wetlands, so they can't drive through the wetlands. So what they are planning to do, and this is not necessarily relevant to the A&R. I'm just explaining what they're proposing to do for the development. They're going to have an easement for the driveway on this lot to then access this lot. So they've got the approval from the ZBA to do that. So both of these would technically be considered buildable lots because it has the lot size and the frontage. They're just not accessing the lot through the frontage. And they have a variance for that.
Okay. Thanks, John. So just so that I understand it correctly, they already, for that second lot, they already have the frontage on Elm Street.
Correct.
They just, rather than access that through the wetlands, they've devised a plan to access it from West Main Street via an easement and some shifting of lot lines.
Correct. And there's going to be 2 separate driveways on this lot because they are not going for a shared driveway special permit from the planning board.
Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Any questions from the planning board? And I appreciate the applicant, Ms. Lee, being on as well. Questions or comments from the planning board?
It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yep, I appreciate they've already been in front of the ZBA as well. So, all right, well, if there's no questions or comments, then I will entertain a motion. The planning board endorse the A&R plan for 0 Elm Street, 30 West Main Street.
So moved.
Second.
All right, assuming no further discussion. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob's yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. Okay. The next one is an A&R for 109 and 111 Winter Street. So maybe we'll follow the same process here. I'm just looking to see if I don't see the applicant on, but they're also not required unless it's Mr. Markinot that is representing them. But John, I think that worked well. So why don't you go ahead and explain this one to us?
Sure. So this one's a little confusing. I actually have to look at my write-up to remember what happened on this one. All right. So the applicant is proposing to swap the land between 109 and 111 Winter Street and Parcel A, as well as create a new building lot with the northern portion of 109 Winter Street. So this will result in one net new lot. So Parcel A is down here, and this is all, I believe this is all one lot currently. And so this will be a lot right here. This will be a lot, and then this will be a lot. So you have these two, or these are all one lot currently, and then this is its own lot. So you're doing a little bit of a land swap and then splitting this lot into two. This will have the required frontage, as you can see, the 200 feet along here. This one will retain the required frontage, and this one, the frontage doesn't change at all. And they all have the required lot area, so they would meet the requirements for an A&R.
Yeah. I think I understand. The middle lot's getting a little bit bigger, the bottom lot's getting a little smaller, and the top lot is the new one.
There's another swap, and I'm trying to find where it is. It's lot 143. Oh, right here, this one. So they're swapping these two triangles, but that doesn't change anything.
All right, questions, comments from the board?
Nope.
All right, then seeing none, I will entertain an motion. The planning board endorses the A&R plan for 109 and 111 Winter Street.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob's yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Matthew,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Gary is a yes. All right, and the last one, hopefully the simplest of them, is 0 Saddle Hill Road. So John, do you want to walk us through this one as well?
Sure. So this one's got a need for 2 votes. This is a town submitted article, or a town submitted A&R. The Jenners are looking to sell or donate the land. I forget which one. I believe sell it to the town. Does not matter. This portion of land, so it's 2 lots here. The quirky thing with this is on our assessor's records, this strip owned by the state is not shown. So on our assessor's records, this is all one lot, and this is 2 pages. So this large portion down here, this is the Massachusetts owned parcel. So it's this large parcel and then this parcel that are to be conveyed to the town. But we need to correct the record and show this Massachusetts owned parcel in between, because it's not currently shown on any plans. But we've conferred with the state, we've conferred with everybody, and this is actually how it is supposed to look. So it's really just establishing these lot lines and I guess changing them, if we want to call it changing, even though they've probably been changed in the past and we just lost the record for it. But it's just creating these 2 lots. They're both landlocked. This is also land here. It is not a road. So these lots are landlocked. You can see on this locust map, it's a little bit easier to tell what's going on here. And so we're just trying to correct the record, And like I said, the town is putting this forward, so they have requested that the planning board vote to waive the fee. So there'd be two votes on this: to recommend approval for the or recommend endorsement of the A&R, and then to waive the fee for the applicant.
Thanks, John. The only thing I didn't realize when I read the meeting packet was that the land is going to be donated to the town.
I don't, and maybe
No.
Dave Del Toro is on. I'm not involved in this. I don't know if it's going to be donated, sold, or how it's going to be conveyed.
Through the chair, I think it's still being negotiated.
Okay, so
Yeah, good evening. My understanding is it will be purchased from the Jenners. The town is currently in the process of trying to set the closing date.
Okay.
So it will be the purchase of both the properties. Town meeting approved the purchase of the properties, but at that time it was thought to be that one large parcel. When we had it surveyed and coordinated with the state, it was identified as kind of being a bisected parcel. But the town will be purchasing it. I think Open Space presented the article at town meeting.
Okay. Thanks, David. You answered my second question. How do we even find this? Because it seems like an obscurity, but I guess that would make sense that in preparation for the
A very
transaction.
old handwritten deed.
Yeah.
Mark Rodance did a lot of extra work on this one, coordinating with the state. They found some old markers out there.
All right. So, questions, comments from the board?
Are we sure, through the chair, are we sure that the open space committee is going to be purchasing it? Is that with great certainty? Jane's nodding her head.
So the open space has applied through CPC for approval of funding for the purchase. So the town will be purchasing it through CPC funding.
And Parker, that was there was a vote in support of that at last town meeting.
Thank you.
All right. So to John's point, we've got two motions before us. First, I'll entertain a motion the planning board endorse the A&R plan for 0 Saddle Hill Road.
So moved.
Second.
So be no further discussion. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. Motion carries. The second is that I'll move that the planning board waive the application fee for the A&R plan at 0 Saddle Hill Road.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So that motion also carries. All right. So I know that I had said 7:30, given a guidelines of 7:30 for the MBTA discussion. Really quickly, maybe what we can do is on the Elmwood Farms, we can vote to continue that. So what was that, John? It was March 18th as our next meeting, and then the decision to the March 27th.
correct.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the stormwater management permit at Elmwood Farms 3. And continue the hearing to March 18th, 2024, and the decision to March 27th, 2024.
So moved.
Rob, second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. And I guess since we're still a couple minutes ahead of schedule, let's also take the minutes from February 5th. Lori, thank you again for your work on those. Does anyone have any questions or suggested edits?
No, they look very good.
All right. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from February 5th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. So, no further discussion. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yep.
And Gary is a yes as well. It's funny. I was just thinking to myself, boy, sometimes I miss meeting in person so that we can avoid the roll call votes. But if we were meeting in person, then I wouldn't be there right now. So maybe virtual isn't always terrible. Yes, John.
So we still have some time before the 7:30 deadline, but I also wanted to provide an update, if it's okay, to the stormwater regulations, because we've got some relatively new information on that. And Emily is just signing on for MBTA, so that'll be perfect timing. So Concom has not had a chance to review the red line version. I thought I had sent it to Kim. I did not. So they are going to review it at their meeting on the 12th. And that kind of gives us a little bit more time to look at some language that was suggested from one of the Concom members in a very specific part of the regulations. So I would recommend the planning board, we can talk about it, but I would recommend at least holding a vote to continue the hearing until the 18th, where we can then incorporate any Concom comments or questions, and then have a nice, clean, non-red line version that has all the language as it should be.
I appreciate the recommendation. That seems to make sense. I don't think this is, unless we had someone that was trying to squeeze something in, I'm not sure it matters that much. And I know that Elmwood Farms is already committed to conforming to the new guidelines. So that makes sense to me. So if nobody objects, then I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the proposed amendments to our stormwater regulations to March 18th.
So moved.
Rob, second.
And assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So, all right. Well, I think the last one is going to take a little bit more discussion tonight. And John, I appreciate the additional info that you sent over earlier today. I did quickly read through it and tried to make as much sense of it as I could. Maybe we kick things off with this. If you would be willing to introduce Emily and just give us a quick recap of where we stand in the process. And I think to your notes earlier, we're going to want to dig a little bit. We're going to want to dig into both the feedback from town council and the other feedback that we received from Emily.
So Emily Innes of Innes Associates is on the call. She is the town's consultant for this. MHP, the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, which is like a quasi-public organization at the state level, made a bunch of funding available for towns to have these consultants help them with the MBTA communities. So town's not paying for it, the state is paying for it. But Emily has helped us review our proposal, given us feedback, worked with Zach on language and other changes, and just basically reviewed the proposal for potential compliance with the state regulations. I will say that Emily is one of or is the person that drafted the model bylaw for the state. So should know what she's talking about. So we trust her viewpoints on this. She brought up a couple things that Zach addressed. So those are things that don't need to be addressed. And I think I may have mentioned those to you in a previous planning board meeting, specifically with the Water Resource Protection Overlay District, the bike parking, the open space issue, being no open space within a wastewater treatment area. So we've resolved all of those to be compliant with state requirements. But I wanted to bring Emily here so that she could go over what her perspective and viewpoint is. And then if any of you had any questions, detailed or general, she would be the person that would probably know the most about that.
All right. Thanks, John, and welcome, Emily. Appreciate you joining us tonight. I'm going to suggest that we kind of go through the hearing tonight in 3 different parts. And that first part, I think it might be worth just doing a little bit of Q&A with Emily. And I think that as we've kind of gotten our arms around this, and I think any of us that are reading the news are watching what's happening in other towns. And I think just, from an educational perspective, I think some folks might have questions out there that Emily, as an expert, maybe you can give us your thoughts on. The second piece of it to me is to go through in a bit more detail the feedback that you've given us, and also the feedback that town council has provided. And to John's note earlier, I think I think it makes sense for us to have a clean version before we take a vote on this. But there's a few things in terms of feedback that we're going to want to resolve before we actually do that. And then the third piece, as this is a public hearing, and I want to make sure that we take the opportunity to see if there's any additional public input or commentary to it. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about going through this discussion. Does that make sense? I see some nodding heads. Okay, Emily, does that make sense to you?
That's fine. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And then if there's something I can't answer and it works, I'm happy to go and try and find that answer as well. So whatever you need from me today, also happy to walk through my memorandum and what the implications of that are. I have not yet seen town council's comments, so maybe that's a discussion back and forth as well.
Okay. Well, we will pull those up and share them on the screen. And I think when I first saw the length of the attachment, I got a little nervous, but there's really just a couple of points that they're pointing out, and then they've got some markups in the bylaw itself. So they're not as bad as maybe they might seem to be. All right. Well, maybe like I said, maybe we'll start this off with a little bit of Q&A, so I'll just open it up to the board. Are there folks that have like what do you want to know about the MBTA communities bylaw that Emily might be able to provide some context for? Parker, I see your hand raised.
I am so appreciative of you being here today, Emily, because I've got some questions. And I wanted to first ask, in your consideration as being one of the principal architects of this bill, do you believe that members of a MBTA communities district should expect their property values to decrease if they are part of this new zoning district? And was that a consideration that the state thought about?
So I can't answer that, and that's because I'm not one of the principal architects of this bill. I came into it after the bill had been passed and after the first set of compliance guidelines had been issued by what was then DHCD. I joined the attempt to create the compliance model, so to figure out how 177 cities and towns could actually demonstrate that they were compliant with the law. And my role on that was to develop the zoning checklist that, if any of you have looked at the compliance model, I worked on that, and then worked with a team came from RKG Associates, Eric Halverson from RKG Associates, and then with Mass Housing Partnership and DHCD to go back and forth, and also a number of testing communities, early adopting communities. Then the second part, and John alluded to this earlier, is I also worked with Mass Housing Partnership and DHCD to create the sample zoning and the guidance within the sample zoning of how communities could tailor it to their needs. But I can't speak to the origin of the law, was not part of that at all.
Do you believe though that folks should be concerned of being part of the district at all based on your lay of the land, or do you think that that's unfounded, and or do you not feel comfortable to answer that too, which is also an appropriate answer?
Yeah, I'm not the economic, so it's unusual that I'm the sole consultant on the technical assistance, because I've been working with RKG on a lot of them, and they are economic and market advisors. I focus on the land use and the regulatory aspect of the technical assistance. So I'm going to defer answering that one, and apologize that I can't answer that for you.
I appreciate it. I had a question though on your follow-up memorandum. I tried to scan it as best I could just to make sure I was looking at it the right way. There was one piece that said about, it was above the resolve concerns in the development standards and affordability requirement section. Am I reading this correctly, that if there is some sort of exemption that is made by the board, that it could possibly disqualify our district, or that we could basically be out of compliance with the regulation? Or did I totally misread that, and any sort of possible exemption that we make wouldn't necessarily disqualify us from being compliant with that rule?
So you're looking at the affordability requirements. My text on that on page 4, just for anybody who might be following along. I think you might be misreading it. You, okay. The town are tying your affordability requirements to your existing Article 11, which is your inclusionary zoning, which is appropriate. Your inclusionary zoning is a little bit above what's in the compliance guidelines, but you have text in there in your draft zoning that says that if EOHLC, which is the successor agency to DHCD, if they say that this doesn't work, then you have language that takes it back to what's in the compliance guidelines. It won't affect the rest of the zoning, is how I read it. Again, understand that town council's been involved as well, so they may have a different read on it, but it's a good way of addressing something where there's a little bit of an unknown. I believe, but I'm not positive, that you were doing economic feasibility analysis, but I may have mixed it up with another town. So if I did, I apologize.
Through the chair, we did not do an economic feasibility analysis.
Okay, so that I was mixing that up. Then in that case, I think what you've done here in sort of my understanding works out perfectly well. You've tied it to existing inclusionary zoning. I've seen other communities do that. You've given HLC the sort of yourself the flexibility if HLC says this doesn't work, and you've already got the language to drop back to. So I think this is, in my opinion, appropriate for what I've seen from other regulations.
Thank you very much for
Parker,
clarifying that.
any additional questions?
Is there anything as part of our regulations that forces communities as part of the district to have to build as part of the MBTA communities regulation? Or do we not force any part of the zone communities to have to build?
So that's an excellent question, and it's I'm glad you brought it up, because it's a common misconception in communities that this is somehow a building target. It's not. It's zoning. It's up to the private market to determine whether or not they're going to submit an application under the zoning. There's no requirement that communities build or that communities build to a specific target.
Those are all my questions. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
All right, John's got a quick response or comment there.
Just to add on to that, Parker, even though it's zoned MBTA communities, that's an overlay. anyone can still develop that land under the existing zoning. It doesn't have to be developed as MBTA communities. It can be built, it could be developed as the agricultural district as well.
I appreciate you confirming that too, because we have had other folks at previous meetings who have asked if there's almost like a, you know, for lack of a better term, a trump card, or, you know, some that if one district, if it's overlaid, leaves the other obsolete. So thank you for clarifying that too, for anybody who might not have heard that before.
Yeah, it's easier to think of it as it's an additional opportunity to develop in a certain way. It does not replace the existing opportunity to develop.
Emily, I have a question for you. And, you know, I think when the law was first passed, we were looking at this from, you know, we were looking for land that was, you know, within I think a half mile of transit stations. And of course that expanded to where these zones could be anywhere in town. And this is something that I've gotten a fair number of questions from people in town that have said, you know, as I've explained the intent behind the MBTA communities law, this idea of, well, I'm not going to repeat it, but, you know, they buy into the argument that it's helpful to have, that it makes sense to build denser housing near train stations. But as we expand into other areas, can you just help us understand the logic behind it? And you know, if we're allowing MBTA communities zoning to be done anywhere, then candidly, why is it only those communities that are near an MBTA station that need to conform?
So I can answer, I think, or give some information. I think that will answer at least some of that. The initial, as I recall, the initial compliance guidelines that were submitted in draft form for review treated all the MBTA communities pretty much the same. And there was some feedback. DHCD, now HLC, received a lot of feedback back, but not all of the MBTA communities were the same. And so you see the rapid transit, which of course are the subway, those were the ones that had to be compliant as of last year. The commuter rail and the adjacent communities that have to be compliant this year, and the adjacent small towns, which need to be compliant by the end of 2025. And they adjusted the requirements for some of them that allowed for the flexibility of putting some land outside the half-mile radius. I'm sure you can appreciate, looking at 177 cities and towns, that there are also very different conditions. So for the adjacent communities and the adjacent small towns where they don't have a commuter rail station, and obviously not a subway since they're not rapid transit, there's a little bit more flexibility granted to those communities, as I understand it, from in the second round and the final compliance guidelines and requirements, because they didn't have that half-mile radius necessarily. There are also some towns, a couple of them are clients, where they may have a commuter rail station, but there are conditions around that commuter rail station that, you know, make it a little bit more difficult to develop. So again, that flexibility of having a certain percentage required around in that half-mile radius, and then allowing others to be outside, just gives a little bit more flexibility to each community to tailor their strategy for compliance to meet their community needs. And I can give an example. You know, you have a clear example in which you've got a downtown area, and then you're very close to a station that's across the border. And so your strategy currently addresses both of those, right? You've got some within that transit area near the station, and some within your downtown. I have a client who's downtown and their transit station, they've got a commuter rail station, are in the same place, but they have a lot of water. It's a coastal community. And so within their half-mile radius is quite a bit of water. And so that reduces, obviously, the land for development since it's surface water. I have another client whose commuter rail station is far out of their town center. It's just that's the way it developed, that they no longer had a rail station in their center. It's common in a couple of communities over the years. And so again, that flexibility, they have to have a lesser amount within their station area. It's also a couple of other physical conditions that limit the area there.
Yeah.
So that was taken into consideration.
Can I just ask a really pointed question though?
Yeah.
There's no requirement that Hopkinton have any of our MBTA zoning within a half-mile radius. I mean, we could put it all on the other side of town,
Yeah.
and that would still comply. And I guess that's what I'm, you know, and again, like why? I mean, aside from and I'm just plain devil's advocate here because I'm very supportive of our plan, but you know, why shouldn't, I mean, if that would be an easier means of compliance, why wouldn't Hopkinton just, you know, put all of this zoning somewhere else?
You have that option. You're an adjacent community. You have that option. I think that, and again, I was not party to the discussions of how those compliance guidelines changed or how the decision was made for the geographic area for the adjacent communities. But my understanding and the way that I've seen it play out and working with other clients is it just gives them more flexibility to put the housing where it makes the most sense, hopefully for that community. So, and again, the choices you've made express, one set of possibilities of how to do it, and it makes a great deal of sense, as I said in my memo. But you might have had other reasons for locating it elsewhere. Certainly, the advice I give is to make it work for your community.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I should clarify too. I am. Again, I think what we put forth, it makes a lot of sense. It aligns with the intent. It's got some flexibility. There are places that if we're going to do some form of denser housing, there are places that would make sense to do so. So my intent isn't to undermine that. I just trying to help other folks understand.
Absolutely.
Understand that as well.
Yeah.
Other general questions before we get into the review.
Through the chair, this is Rob. Could I ask? I have a question, or
Sure.
Actually multiple questions. So, as we're elected into the planning board, I'm trying to think about this in all aspects as representing everybody in town that's put me in this position. That's financial. That's what's in their best interests. And one of the things I think people are looking at, not just in Hopkinton, but all the surrounding towns, is what's going on in Milton. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts or opinions in kind of dealing with this on a day-to-day basis about what's going on there. I think I have an opinion on what the Attorney General is trying to do to set an example, but I don't think the Attorney General has a case, but I think she's trying to put fear in towns that the state could sue. So I'm curious what your opinion is on that whole situation.
So I haven't worked with the town of Milton. I will say in full disclosure, I'm a former planning board member for the town of Milton. So I would say I probably have a lot of opinions. I'm not sure that it's appropriate for me to share them one way or the other. But from a larger perspective, there has always been the message, starting with the Attorney General's letter last March to communities saying that the Attorney General's office, this is a law, and the Attorney General office said that communities must comply with the law. And so I think what we're all seeing is that there is a consistent message to the communities that choose not to comply. And Milton happens to be the first that is not in compliance. And so we're seeing, the results of that. So again, not involved with the town of Milton now, not involved with, anything on the Attorney General's. I'm just seeing the same news that's coming through that everybody else is seeing.
If I can just make one quick comment, and this is kind of my interpretation of it, but, regardless of whether or not any of us agree with the intent of this, I think it is fair to say that if only a portion of the communities conform with it, then it doesn't work. And those communities that conform are then penalized or absorbing a bigger impact of this than those communities that might opt to deny it. So I think from my perspective, that's where the state is working really hard to have everyone cooperate here, because otherwise it just ends up being a hot potato that kind of gets passed around, and whoever's holding the potato when the music stops is gonna bear an unfair load. So that's just kind of my take on it. But I think it's that mindset of, if everyone does this together, it works. If a third of the communities opt out of it for some reason, then that's where it starts to lose some of its impact and really fairness across the communities.
And I'll also add that, the way that I've approached this work, the way I've talked about it with my clients, including yourselves tonight, is we are clearly seeing a housing shortage. We are clearly seeing a shortage of affordable housing. The state passed a law to ask communities that said, look, you need to do your part in creating the housing. And my role is to help the communities that I work with find the best means. Remember, I'm a planner, so find the best means of how complying with this law can help you as a community address your own specific housing needs. And so in the conversation we've had, it's what does your community need out of housing? Many of them, it's housing diversification of types. Some of it is solely housing creation, and obviously this zoning would allow for that. And so that's been my perspective. What does community A need? What does community B need? How can this law help them address not all of their housing needs, because this law does not address the wide variety of housing needs, but the specific needs that a community has that this law can address? How do we best use it to address that? So it becomes a positive for a community and feels less of an imposition, which I understand many people see that.
Through the chair, can I ask another question? Change gears here.
Sure.
So, Emily, I totally appreciate that. I think the reality is we wouldn't be talking about a new zoning district if this wasn't a law, and a lot of people are fearful of what it could do to their property value, what it could do to the town. As a town, we've experienced a lot of growth. We've funded a tremendous amount of money into new schools, new school buildings, and people are cognizant of that. They're not blind to see their tax bills and how more housing would impact their tax bills. So, but to change gears, one thing I think as a planning board we struggle with is you get over the initial kind of apprehension towards this law, and then you start looking at what other towns are doing, and it seems like a lot of other towns, from the my ability to research, propose districts that aren't really financially, they propose land areas that aren't realistically able to be developed. Like they'll put the MBTA communities on a parcel that has $100 million corporate building. So they're not going to tear down the corporate building to put in housing. Like that scene, and they'll put it on a condo association, which is already almost of the size. If not, it's really hard to disassemble a condo association. So it's not practical that land area will ever be developed for an MBTA communities. So that's what I'm seeing with other towns. And one of the things we debated a lot, like we put it to our zoning advisory board to come up with parcels. And I think even today, like I know I have some thoughts on what parcels should be included. I know other people on the board have thoughts on what parcels should be included. And it's a two-part question. How do you advise towns on like what land area? Because it's really, I think to a large degree, whether it's right or wrong, there's not an overwhelming support to build a bunch of new housing in Hopkinton. So if you look at the voters, they're going to say, we don't want a bunch of new housing in Hopkinton. So one of the things to stay in compliance is, well, how do you put forth land that may not be developed anytime soon, or that's not financially practical. And then the second part of my question is, so how do you think about that and how do you advise towns and your clients? And the second part is, this is eventually going to go to our town meeting, where people on the town meeting floor are going to propose amendments and say, take this parcel out, put this parcel in. And I could see that, like, I haven't been to other town meetings where they discuss it, but I've read these town meetings for this specific topic last 4 or 5 hours, long discussion segments for this one topic. So how do you, on a town meeting floor, try to manage that situation? So the first part is, what do you think about the land that's proposed and how we should think about it? And the second part is the actual workings of a town meeting and trying to manage that situation.
So I'm going to actually answer your second part first, because I think that is that's a critical thing, not just for you as a planning board to think about, but also for the moderator, for town meeting attendees at town meeting themselves. There's 2 parts to compliance, and the part obviously that's going to town meeting is the zoning. But the other part is the compliance model that proves whether or not you as a town are compliant. And the compliance model works on the zoning parameters that will now be enshrined in your zoning, and those are primarily dimensional standards, and also the geography. The dimensional standards are relatively easy to model on the fly. So because we collectively, the team that worked on that model built it not just as a tool for demonstrating compliance, but as a tool for evaluating potential iterations. We knew that communities would want to, or we hoped communities would want to try different possibilities. And so the tool is built so you can say, we'd like to try 3 stories, we'd like to try 2.5 stories, we'd like to try 4 stories, and just see what it does. And that's true of any of the dimensional standards that the model uses. But the other part is the geography. And the geography requires that you pull down base layers from the state website that was set up to provide the information. And that includes the parcel data, the excluded land, and the sensitive land. And moving parcels in and out at town meeting would require redrawing all of those boundaries, re-inputting the geography into the compliance model. It is not easy to do on the fly. In fact, we haven't done that for any of our communities on the fly. If we've got a community meeting or a committee meeting where people are saying, let's look at this, let's look at that, we have to take the geography back and work with it. So that's going to be so as you think of your strategy of discussions at town meeting, you may want to consider how you're going to deal with questions of changing geography. And I would recommend a strategy session with your town moderator and your town council to talk about that, because as I said, it's not going to be easy. To answer your first question of how do we think about geography, you're absolutely correct. There are communities that are including as part of their strategy projects or parcels that already have some form of development on them, including some of the communities I'm working with. I have a broad range. I do have some communities that are looking for minimal compliance. They want to be compliant with the law, but sort of just over that. I also have communities that are looking to produce housing. So one of my communities last year that I worked with, they had an area that already had a significant amount of housing on it, but they had, a reasonable number of parcels that were not developed to their highest and best use. So their strategy was to place an overlay over the whole area to allow for the possibility of those parcels to be redeveloped in a way that matched the other housing in the area, housing and mixed use, actually, because it it was a mixed use district. I have a couple of communities now that are looking to create housing as part of their MBTA strategy. So the zones that they're targeted are targeted very specifically to allow for additional housing. They're seeing that as a strategy that will help revitalize certain areas of their town, including downtown areas. By having housing closer to the amenities, it will increase the economic base for those small businesses, and that's what they're looking for. And as I said, there are ones that are saying, well, you know, this is already a apartment complex, but it's older and they may want to redevelop it. And so we're going to put the overlay on now. And then there are others that say this office building, I've got one where it's a couple of office buildings that we might be looking at, and they're expecting that office use will change in the next 10 to 20 years because of the decline in needs for large office buildings. And then there are some that say exactly as you said, well, this is a condo development, and if we put it on there, the likelihood of somebody changing that condo development is relatively slim, but we are capturing density that already exists in the community, and that's a strategy we're using. So it's very much community dependent, and in some cases it's a combination of those. We want these parcels to change, so we're going to create the zoning that allows for those parcels to change. At the same time, we're going to meet at least some of our requirements by rezoning parcels that already have that density.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Emily. Any last questions before we move into the kind of the technical review portion?
If we have follow-up questions, because I want to allow time for the remainder of the meeting, could we email Emily, or how could we submit additional questions? Just to
I'd say probably just funnel them through John.
John. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and appreciate the dialogue there, and certainly helpful background for us. So we have a couple of reviews or edits, and maybe we actually start with town council. And John, are you able to pull that up on the screen? And I think there's really one primary point of conflict in it, but so Emily, I'm curious to get your perspective. I'm not, you can read this faster than I can read it to you, but you know, clearly the component of site plan review. So maybe I'll give you a quick minute there and let us know when you're done, and then would love to get your thoughts on it.
If you can scroll down to the next page, please.
Fast reader.
Just pulling up one thing over on my end to just double check. I will say that your town council did raise the same concerns I had about the special permit process that's existing, and whether or not it might be a little bit more stringent than the as of right use would require. So and actually, if you can go back one, please, back to the original. Yeah, I would be very careful to make sure that the site plan review is consistent with as of right. And so, that's the only thing I think we were both concerned about the same thing.
Okay. And so maybe maybe I can take a shot at explaining this to the other folks here. The concern, so some of our reviews as planning board have what we call a site plan review, which is just a more detailed review of the project. It's looking at a number of different things, and the intent of it is to make sure that we're not just that we're making sure that it conforms to at a higher level of detail to what is intended use for the parcel. And the concern here is that what we can't do is we can't include a site plan review for something related to MBTA communities that wouldn't be required for other uses allowed by right. So it's a matter of making sure that we're consistent. And that if whatever required a site plan review prior to MBTA communities, it's okay for that to include a site plan review after MBTA communities, but there shouldn't be new requirements for site plan reviews as a result of MBTA communities. Did I get that right? Is that?
Yes, you're sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Your
No.
site plan review can't be more onerous for MBTA communities. It can't, so site plan review, I'm sure you know, but just for those who are listening, site plan review, you cannot deny the use that's allowed as of right. And you can't put conditions on it that are so onerous that it would, by definition, deny that use. So, that the board is allowed to put certain conditions on it related, strangely enough, to the site, which is why it's called site plan review, but also the buildings. So things like circulation, access, landscaping, lighting, in some cases signage, the position of the building, et cetera, et cetera. But where a special permit rises to the level of requiring other things that might be in the public benefit, and the board is allowed to deny that use or deny the special permit if that higher standard isn't met. That's not true of site plan review. You can set conditions. The conditions cannot be overly onerous, as we already discussed, but you also cannot deny that use if the use is allowed as of right. And so when I reviewed this, I was looking at language to suggest that suggested that there might not be that as of right use. So I had raised an earlier memorandum because I was looking at the timeline, and you had a public hearing required and the notification requirements for a public hearing. Some communities do that. They have that public hearing requirement. Others don't. It's just part of a regular meeting of the planning board. So my concern was, did the public hearing create that more onerous requirement? And I was actually meeting with another community and their town council at the same time about the same issue. So we had that discussion, and because you have the 6-month restriction on here that the plan review should be completed no more than 6 months, we were comfortable with that other community. I translated it to your community as well, that Hopkinton would not be out of compliance with that. So, but I think having your town council render an opinion on that as well is really important. And I noticed that your town council suggested referring to the specific requirements in your current zoning. I believe that's on the 2nd page, and I would concur with that, so that everybody understands what's within the site plan review process.
So John, maybe you can just go to that revised language, but I guess, how does this change impact what we're proposing to move forward with here?
If you just go to the top of the 2nd page, John, of the legal, yeah. So let's see. So
The applicant must submit the materials for site plan review required under section 210, 259B.
Yep.
So I think-
210. Yep.
They gave a red line version, so I think that might clear it up
Perfect.
as to what to do, or what they're suggesting we do. So it's basically get rid of this entire section and just have this one line.
Can you zoom in a little bit, John?
Oh, okay. Yep, that's fine. So we had in there the language that I reviewed on your behalf. That's from the sample zoning, that section B submission requirements. And so they're just, your town council is making it consistent with your, now hang on, the reference he gives. John, the reference he's given is to the reference up above, that 259B. But he's just crossed out to, see, it says the applicant must submit the materials for site plan review required under section 210, 259B. But this is 210, 259B. It
Yeah,
looks like it's a
I'll
circular
check with
reference.
him.
Okay, I think his letter
Guessing he
said
meant to
one-
do Article 20, which is what our site plan review
Yeah.
section is in our zoning, but I'll check and make sure.
Okay. Yeah. So my assumption is that he's doing exactly that. He's just rather than having a new set of materials, he's referring it back to your Article 20. So it's just consistent in the set of materials. That's what I'm assuming is happening here.
Okay, and just in terms of kind of plain speak for us, the implications of this change just means that in the prior version, there might have been some situations that would have resulted in a site plan review that maybe legally shouldn't be required. And so by cleaning this up, it's ensuring that there would be no additional additional or additive site plan reviews.
I think it's not so much that it would create a bad situation. It's just that if I remember, I'd have to go back and look at your Article 20, but I think the list of required documents was just simply more specific. So than the list that's under B4 that's struck through here. So it just makes sense if you've already got a list of requirements to refer back to those.
Okay.
And keep that consistency with your,
Got
and
it.
again, assuming there's nothing onerous in that list, and I'm assuming your town council already reviewed that list and because they're referring to it, assumed it was okay. Or assumed it was
Okay,
compliant.
so it's two parts. So part of it is just being consistent, and that way it's one single source of something that needs to be updated, and it ensures that whatever applies in one situation applies in another.
Yes, that's what I'm seeing based on your council's comments and this change.
Okay. Any questions or comments from folks about this commentary from town council and the discussion about it? Are we all comfortable with this change? It seems to make sense to me. It's part cleanup and part compliance. I can't see everybody, so you might need to speak up if you have reservations.
No, it makes sense to me, Jerry.
That seems reasonable.
Through the chair, can I just clarify? By doing this, we're not changing anything in our site plan review. We're just cleaning up the language here in the bylaw, correct?
That's my understanding. That's what I was getting to before is are we giving anything up by making this change? And the only thing that we would be giving up is, so to your question, part of it is just making sure that the requirements are the same. If there was a situation where MBTA bylaw was implying a site plan review that otherwise wouldn't be required, then that would be a violation of the law anyways.
Through the chair, I might be able to clarify a little
Yeah,
bit.
sorry, thanks.
So
Greg.
this just requires an applicant to submit under the same process as our current site plan, because even some by right uses are still required to go through site plan. So that makes it even with other by right uses in town. So that's kind of one of the thresholds that we have to cross, or we have to hold to, in order to be compliant with the zoning, is that it's the same as any other by right use. So that's taken care of there. In terms of giving up things, I don't know if you can consider this giving up things, but the state is limiting what you can review under site plan review for MBTA communities. And so that basically says, or that's covered in this in section D, and it splits 2 pages, so it's a little tough to see. But the site plan approval, we always talk about decision criteria. The decision criteria would be that the project meets the development standards set forth in the MBTA community section. So all the site plan standards that we have in Article 20 would not necessarily apply, because we would be reviewing the site plan based on the development standards of the MBTA community zoning. But the submission requirements would be the same as any other by right use. Does that make sense?
So, if a developer was
Elise, you're breaking up.
now, hello?
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
No,
Building
still coming in and out.
for this. Okay. Okay. Never mind. I'll
Maybe Elise, if you turn off your video and just try to go audio, see if that works.
okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so if a developer were to propose to build a 5 or 7-story building in downtown, that would still flag site plan review? Would we have control over that? That's something we'd be giving up.
So you're limited to a 40, don't have the bylaw in front of me. You're limited to a height max. So you wouldn't be able
Okay.
to do a 5 or 7-story building downtown.
Okay. All right.
I think all of us just want to make sure that we're not unknowingly giving something up with this change, or some level of influence or scrutiny or something else. And I think, for me at least, I always, I think all of us want to make sure that if something's going to get built, that it's something that the town can be proud of, that it's an asset, that it's something that people like to have. And, sometimes those criteria don't always go with what's profitable or the most economical for a developer. So I think that's where we just want to make sure that we understand. Maybe we're not giving up anything, but we just want to make sure that there's not any unintended consequences of this change.
Through the chair, if I can just address one thing that Elise brought up.
Sure.
So I think she brought up a critical point that I've seen misunderstood by people who haven't been involved with the process in other communities. Maybe they haven't attended public meetings, and that is the as of right. I have heard people think that as of right means, oh, you can just build anything. And I think your point about the height is a good one. You have dimensional standards in section 210, 255 that limit the height, the lot size, the open space, the frontage So it's important to understand that an as of right project must still comply with all of those. And then the development standards, that's 210, 257, the general development standards is what you're going to be using during your site plan review as the criteria for approval. So it's important that you feel comfortable with those as well. But I think Elisa's point, asking that question about that height is a critical question to understand that you do have that limitation and others on any buildings.
Through the chair, just this is Vic here. Just a quick clarification, Emily. I mean, you might have answered this, but just want to reassure it. As we are trying to lot the zoning and everything, there are parcels where residential and there are parcels where non-residential lots which are there. So when we do this rezoning, this would be called as a separate zoning called just MBTA zoning. It won't be called as a residential or industrial. Is that what? It's actually a new zoning itself will be introduced, added to our list with existing zonings.
Yes, that's correct. It would be a separate district added to the list of other districts. So if you haven't already worked that into your warrant article, it should be there. And then it acts, as John mentioned earlier, it's an overlay on top of your existing district. So a property owner has the choice of applying one or the other to anything they want to do.
So either you can go, let's say if it's a commercial or industrial zoning, then you can go as an industrial as well as MBTA zoning.
They have to choose either or. So an applicant, once they've chosen, can't pick and choose from the requirements. So if the applicant chooses your multifamily overlay district, then everything they have to do has to be within the limits of that zoning. If they choose the industrial, then everything they do has to be within the limits of that commercial industrial.
So does that mean that in future, if somebody, let's say that they resell that zone again, they can convert back to industrial from MBTA? Just semantics. I'm just trying to, John, maybe.
Yeah, so in theory, you could make a choice. I've got a property, whatever, and I'm going to develop it as multifamily. And then I've changed my mind 10 years down the line and I want to do the base zoning. In theory, you could do that. In practice, you'll then say it's an undeveloped parcel now. So they've chosen, in our example, to develop it as a multifamily. 10 years from now, they say, no, wait, I want to do industrial, but that parcel now has an economic value as a multifamily. And so they would have to make that decision that for some reason, the multifamily isn't of economic value, and clearing it and creating an industrial use would be a higher economic value. Certainly in today's market, that would not be the case. Not an economics person, so not going to guess 10 years out on industrial versus residential costs. But there is a consequence to making that decision that might preclude making it again in a short period of time.
Will that impact the town by any way? Because we as a town planning board member said that, this is MBTA, but down the lane, they changed it to non-MBTA. So it still goes to the planning process, but it will have impacts, long-term impacts.
Yeah, and if you're, again, we're discussing our imaginary parcels, so we're commercial industrial now, with the overlay going on top of it. The property owner has then the right to choose which makes more sense. But as you say, either way, it would still come before you to have the discussion. But if they're both as of right uses, then they would come forward as under the appropriate site plan review process. And that's how you'd see it.
Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Were there any other, Emily, from just the other changes? I think were largely related to definitions. Was there anything else that jumped out to you that's worthy of discussion with us now?
If John doesn't mind putting it back up just for a quick skim, it looked to me that what I caught looked reasonable, but I just want to, I'm not sure I saw the last paragraph. So of the lawyer's letter or your town council's letter. Building infill lots.
Right there.
Yep, that looked fine. The building general. Yeah, I see town council's point about that. I think the primary building, and I'm not sure that we ended up, I don't recall that we ended up putting a definition, but it tends to be the one that's closest to the street. But of course, if you have a corner lot or multiple buildings, you might have the ambiguity that your town council defines. So if you wanted to define primary building, that would probably address that. I agree with the comment on, I'm working my way up. I agree that the comment on the definitions is accurate, and we have also taken out with certain communities, we've taken out the definitions that don't apply. But if town council has already inserted suggested text, I think that would, without reviewing it, I think that's a reasonable strategy as well. And I don't think there was anything different on the first page. Yeah, so that was just a site plan review on the first page. Okay.
So are people, I'm generally comfortable with incorporating these recommended changes into the bylaw. I'm just looking for folks on the planning board to see if they have any other concerns or any reason not to. I mean, to me, it also comes back to, you know, even to Rob's question about town meeting floor. To some degree, the number of reviews and discussions and the properties we've looked at and having town council review all ahead of time. I think that further strengthens the case to not make more changes, but anybody I can't see everybody, but I'm sensing that we're okay with these recommended changes.
Yes.
Somebody
I think
will give me
so.
a yes. Thanks, Jane.
Yeah.
Okay. Thumbs up. Thank you, Elise. So Emily, any other concerns in your review that you want to highlight that you think it's worth us talking about now? And to your point, I think we've addressed, you know, through Zach and your work with them, I think we've addressed them, but and we can pull up your letter as well, though you probably have that one in front of you. Anything else that we should be discussing?
Just sort of doing a quick review to see if anything. I don't think so. I was very comfortable with your geography. I thought that was well thought through, splitting the districts and addressing both downtown and the area near the Southborough station. The model that I reviewed met the requirements, which is terrific. And I think we've addressed either through Zach or tonight the other questions that I had. So I was, again, from the regulatory standpoint, from seeing the compliance model and the zoning, I was comfortable with it. I think you all did a nice job on how you addressed it. And as you know, it's nice to see that you've already had town council review it from a legal standpoint. I always recommend that because Innes Associates is not a law firm, and so it's important to have that review done. So I was pretty comfortable with everything.
And I guess the last takeaway for me, and John, maybe if we can take an action item to set up some time with the town moderator and you and myself and town council just to talk through this one as well. I think that's probably sage advice. It's probably worth a quick conversation if you're comfortable with that. I guess that's assuming that we move it forward, but we've got a little bit of time left, but I think that's a sound recommendation.
So through the chair, just to kind of put a clarification on that statement, it's going to town meeting. It's on the warrant. I guess the planning board could vote to take it off, but
Okay,
planning board is now just
yeah.
in the hearing to recommend.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess we just haven't actually formalized the language that we're moving forward yet, so. Okay. So I think we're good there. Lastly, going back to my 3 prongs here, I just want to see if there's any other public comments or questions or comments from the board. And we are going to continue this one more time just to go back and get a cleaned up version to take a vote on. But again, I want to make sure that people have the opportunity to ask questions and share their thoughts if necessary. Members of the public, you can raise your hand. It's down in the reactions button, or you can just wave and we'll see you. Okay. Well, Emily, thank you very much for joining us, and appreciate all of your support along the way here. I guess on that note, I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the MBTA Communities bylaw to March 18th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So one last round, and then I'm sure everyone is ready to move on from this one, at least until town meeting. Yes, John?
So just to clarify with the board, are you looking for a clean version incorporating all town council and Emily's comments to be presented at the 18th, plus
Yes.
the red line so you can compare? Anything else? We haven't changed the map at all, so the map is going to stay the same. It's just going to be incorporating town council's comments.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for tonight. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Jane is a yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Vic?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. Thank you all. Good discussion. And have a good night.
Thank you. Good meeting.